Good morning and welcome back, everyone. What's a wonderful third day and last day at the WSF 2020. Today, we are in this session. We're going to talk about food. I think this is something that is absolutely important to all of us humans and beyond. To take us, so we're going to talk about three things: our diet. We're going to talk about the cost of waste, and we're also going to talk about novel ways to change our behaviors. So I'm really looking forward to this session, and I have probably one of the most exciting group of specialists to talk you through this. We're going to start with Kanji Shen from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. Kanji, I have a question for you, and probably that's what you're going to cover. We've just had breakfast, but is it time to change our diet? And what indicators have we got to support that? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marcel, for introducing me. Okay, I can start. So hello, everyone. I'm Kanji Chen. Currently, I'm a PhD student of ETH Zurich. And today, I'm very happy and delighted that I could share our research stories in the World Sustainability Forum. And today, I'm going to talk about the topic on how to tackling food sustainability through dietary change. It is the scenario-based analysis for Switzerland. So as we all know, diet is highly linked with human health and environmental sustainability. On the one hand, food system, especially food production, is associated with a lot of freshwater use, a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, and a lot of land use. It is also linked with a lot of biodiversity loss due to the land use. In addition, over-application of fertilizer also makes the food system as a major polluter for terrestrial and aquatic systems. On the other hand, there is an increasing prevalence of the non-communicable diseases, and the dietary and metabolic risks are the highly associated factors linked with mortality of non-communicable disease. While dietary choices determines the health and the environmental outcomes, we also have to think about like a healthy and environmental friendly diet should also be economically affordable, because dietary choices are also shaped by the price of different food products. This is very important, especially for low-income countries and households. So with this background, we conducted analysis for different dietary scenarios. And we want to quantitatively evaluate the sustainability performance of these scenarios with the implications for environmental, nutritional, human health, economic dimensions of food sustainability. So first, we designed the dietary scenarios. We started from the reference one, which is the Swiss current diet based on FAO data. Start from the reference, we first developed two scenarios following the dietary guidelines. One is from FAO, another is from the Swiss guidelines. And next, we designed 4 diets which are with more plant-based products. They are vegan diet, vegetarian, pescatarian, and flexitarian diet. And the next 2 are the diet with even more intense animal-sourced products. And last, we also developed a tax scenario, which we assume that Switzerland will implement carbon tax on the food products according to their associated carbon footprints. And with these scenarios, we first analyze their environmental impact. We focused on the production stage of the food products. And we calculated the footprints with food commodity-specific footprints. And next, we assess the nutrition quality of different diets. We included more than 20 nutrients, including macronutrients, vitamins, and minerals. And to evaluate the health outcomes when the whole population shifts from one diet to an alternative one, we adopted the comparative risk assessment frameworks to use DALYs as an indicator to show what is the impact for human health. And last, we also assess the economic cost of different diets. We connect the price data from the Swiss supermarket to roughly estimate the budget for each scenario. So here is the overview of the human health, nutritional, environmental, economic indicator scores for different scenarios. We marked the one with the best performance in green and the one with the worst performance in red. So for example, you can see the RSN, which is the diet following a Swiss dietary guideline. It can do a very good job in terms of the nutritional quality, and it can greatly bring environmental benefits, especially for these three environmental indicators. They are land use footprints, nitrogen footprints, and phosphorus footprints. And also this RSN scenario is the one with the lowest cost according to our estimation. And for the plant-based diets, for example, we can see for vegan diet, the VGN, we can find the trade-offs between different dimensions. Yes, they can do a very good job according to the health impact. They can reduce a lot of DALYs from the Swiss population. But if we check the nutrition quality, we can see that the vegan scenarios could bring risk in nutrition deficiency because it has low content in some essential nutrients like vitamin B12. And on the other hand, we can see for the scenario with high intense animal source product, it is not only bring negative effect of human health, but also for the environmental impact. So let's dive into the research with more details. This slide shows the change in environmental impact when we shift from the current scenario to the alternative one. We can see like all the recommended scenario and these 4 plant-based scenario, they can bring a lot of remarkable environmental benefits. And if we go into the individual footprint, we can see, for example, for these 4 plant-based scenario, the yellow bar, which represents the freshwater use, is almost missing, which indicates that if we shift towards the plant-based scenario, we cannot contribute too much to freshwater saving. But we can also directly see that for greenhouse gas emissions, these scenarios can contribute a lot for the greenhouse gas reduction. And we also compare the footprints of different scenarios with the so-called food-related planetary boundaries. We marked the one which transit the planetary boundaries in red. So for example, we can see current Swiss diet, which is the first one, the reference scenario. It is associated with too much greenhouse gas emissions and nitrogen use, which transit the planetary boundaries. So it indicates that we may have to cut the food consumption of certain products, which links to high greenhouse gas emissions and fertilizer use. So this slide shows the result on the health impact if we shift from the current Swiss diet to an alternative one. Again, the recommended scenario, the first 2 and the next 4 plant-based scenarios can bring a lot of health benefits in terms of coronary heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and cancers. And with the diet, which contains more animal sourced product, it will have negative environmental impact and increase the DALYs for Swiss population. This slide shows the results on the nutrition quality of different scenarios. This table shows how each diet meet the recommended nutrient intake level. The one marked in red shows the one that failed to meet the recommendations. For example, for vegan diet, vegetarian diet, it has low content in certain essential nutrients. And this is the details with the result of individual nutrients. And as I mentioned, we also use the nutrition quality indicators to evaluate the profile of the nutrition for each diet. These indicators are nutrition balance score, disqualifying nutrition score, and population share with adequate nutrients. And it can evaluate the nutrition profiles in a more integrated way. This is the last slide about my result. It shows the relative cost for different scenarios. Again, we find that a healthy and nutrition and sustainable diet, which are these ones, these scenarios, is not necessarily more expensive. They are even lower than the current Swiss scenario. So overall, we estimated the impact of dietary shift on environment, human health, nutrition, and economic dimensions with multiple indicators. And it provides the magnitude of possible benefits for Switzerland if it decides to transit towards sustainable dietary pattern. And our results are in line with a lot of other studies, which suggesting that shifting to a healthy diet is not only good for health, but also for our planet. Our analysis underscores the needs to consider multiple indicators when assessing the sustainability performance. And as this screen shows, that it provides a template to conduct such studies in other countries and also in other settings. Of course, we have more than these challenges in tackling the food system sustainability. And unfortunately, maybe we couldn't find the true best diet for Switzerland because we only covered this limited number of scenarios. And the diet is also varies from person to person. And our research also limited in the data and brings a lot of uncertainties. For example, we use the global average footprints when estimate the environmental impact. Actually, it will make the results more accurate if we can use the country-specific environmental footprint for different products. And again, the food sustainability is a very systematic issue. Today, we talk about dietary choices here, but also we have to work a lot in production and also to take a lot of actions in reducing food loss and waste. If you are very interested to these topics, you can also check other publications of our lab, Sustainable Food Processing Lab of ETH Zurich. For example, we recently published a paper about the nutritional and environmental losses of global food waste. And also, we have another framework which provides a multi-indicator sustainability assessment for the global food system. So thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, you can check our website to find our contents or send us emails. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanchi. Bang on time and absolutely, absolutely riveting. Look, we've heard it from the specialist. Changing your diet is good for fresh water, for the earth, is good for your health, and is cheaper. I'll take it on your last, on your last words, which were about food loss and food waste, which is going to enable us to actually move to our next speaker. Our next speaker comes from a city that is close to my heart, Fulda. Professor Dr. Tonja Ruppenthal, I hope you're online.
Yes, I'm online. Hi,
Excellent.
Good morning.
Excellent. She comes from Fulda University of Applied Sciences, And we just heard about food waste, and she's going to look at it from a managerial perspective. How much does it cost? The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Marcel. Welcome, everybody. We looked at the food waste management in the retail sector, specific in a regional perspective. And as you guessed, yes, in this case, it's really the region where I'm actually born and where I'm also working after traveling through all over the world. And our agenda, I'm talking about our agenda because my students and I did it. So I'm the presenter, but pretty much I wrote the paper and the students did the research, and it's a collaborative work, of course, with my students. And we're going to have very quickly at a short introduction, the materials and methods, and then focused on, of course, the outcome of the research we did in a practical perspective. As the most of you know, the 17th goals of the Sustainable Development Goals is, of course, that it would be nice to save on the save food waste, particularly on the consumer level, but more important also at the retailers level. And this is what we are going to look on our research. And when we look at Germany alone, on average, there are already 12 million tons food per year, which end up as food waste. So it's a very high number in Germany. So we said, well, if in Germany the food waste is already kind of high, and in the retail sector, it is stated that there's a potential saving of 84%. We said, why don't we look at the retail sector to see how can we prevent food waste and what are the causes of it. But of course, our research is not unique. There's research already out there, and I come to that in a second. Our aim was, as I just stated, okay, how can we prevent food waste, particularly in the grocery retail sector on the owner's perspective, and what are the causes of it? Why the owner's perspective? We undertook a literature review within the last 5 years worldwide, of course, always English-spoken literature, ranked literature, which were peer-reviewed, so in ranked journals. And we found out in the literature review that within the last 5 years, the papers were focusing pretty much on Europe. So all the papers we found out looking at the retailer sectors, particularly here investigating managers at the retailers, were all in Europe, none of in the US or other countries, and looking how can food waste be prevented there. A research gap which we found out was that all of the papers investigated mainly employed managers, so none of them actually looked at the owners of the retail stores. They also, of course, asked food banks and other parts, but we said, well, when you look at our German sector, it's a very specific sector to focus on because it's ranked the most important sector in the whole Europe from the numbers of food waste. And in the statements in the literature review, it was said that owners can prevent food waste, but none of the papers actually looked at the owners. They just purely investigated employed managers. So we said, yeah, well, okay, we focus on owners because in the German sector is this possible, even if they're all big change. There is the possibility that you connected with a chain, but you really own the store. So the data collection was said, we looked at a case study, the special region here in East Hessen, and try to find owners which would to undertake a semi-structured interviews with us. And when I say we try to find, it's a very sensitive topic because of course the owners have to display or answer sensible question regarding their food waste in the store. It was very difficult to actually find owners, but we found 4 owners and 1 employed manager. So this sample is very small with 5 overall who undertook the interviews with us. Also, when we look at all the other papers out there in the literature review, the sample is not that small because the 10 papers we found, 4 also did expert interviews only with 1 manager. So the sample is not that small compared to it, although this is already a limitation of our study. The sampling procedure was through personal contacts that we even found them. But I mean, this is normal that you have this limitation. So we did semi-structured expert interviews with the owners, and of course then transcribed it and analyzed it through qualitative content analysis to come up with our results. And here the results, I mentioned just very shortly those 6 points, but I'm going into detail a bit more. So those overall 6 points were the main outcomes of it. So we looked at the incoming and outgoing goods processed. What does it mean? It means that in this incoming and outgoing goods, we found out that actually our owners could settle agreements with suppliers by themselves, so they were not driven by the headquarter, and which means that they had agreements in place with the suppliers that suppliers could take back the food wasted, so if products were not sold in the store, or other agreements that the owners of the retailers were responsible themselves to sell all of the products. So different agreements, how the leftover products in the store were handled. Furthermore, very important topic in this incoming and outgoing were the food monitoring. So how did the owners summarize the food monitoring process of the products? How is it with the expiration dates, the quality of the product, the tidiness of the product? And linked to this, how did they record the outgoing goods also? All of them had digital systems in place which work pretty good, so that they exactly know what products are coming in the store, what products are going out of the store. So the recording system was stated by all of them is very, very good already, so that they exactly know what is coming in and what's going out. To the amount of food waste, this might be specific to the region. The food waste amounts between 0.1% only of the total monthly turnover. Only 1 store had 2.5%, but other than that, the food waste problem in the store wasn't that much of a problem. Of course, we can say maybe they didn't disclose everything in the discussion, but the waste was really small, and we can say they weren't kind of lying, because when we link it to the commodities with the highest share, it's pretty much the same like in the literature reviews we found, that fruits and vegetables are the commodities with the highest share which are wasted. I mean, this is naturally fruits and vegetable. They can be in the store only 1 till maybe 3 days. The consumers are grabbing the fruits and vegetables, so they get spoiled very quickly. And this is followed then by milk and dairy commodities, which have the highest share of the amount of food waste. For the courses, there were a lot of courses mentioned, but due to time things, the main cause of food waste actually is the expiration date. So this has to do with the consumers are also grabbing the products in the back shelves and not taking out the products in the front of the shelf. So when the product comes close to the expiration date, the consumers just do not want to buy those products anymore. Although everybody agreed on it, even if the expiration date is on the product, it doesn't mean that the product is bad. But consumers just do not want to buy it anymore. So expiration date is the biggest cause of it. And I come to the prevention strategy of this in a second. And the second one is really the consumer forecasting behavior. So like I already stated, consumers do not take the products from in the front, they reach back in the shelves, or the consumers, for example, decide for a meat product, and then while they're in the store, they say, oh, I didn't want that, and just leave it in the store. So of course this is then food waste because the cold chain cannot meet anymore. And this is another very big problems. Other problems are mentioned is marketing standards which are given by the legislation actually. I mean, we didn't look closer in the legislation part, but apparently here there is a field of improvement. I'm not a legislation expert, but this would be something which could be further investigated. Then of course sometimes ordering problems, or we did the switches last year in summer where it was really hot, so of course sometimes cold chain problems which couldn't be met, or also inadequate storage condition itself. And the prevention strategy, very interesting. In our sample, at least, the owners stated that the problem of the expiration date, they really can solve, at least in 2 stores, they had not that much food waste anymore with price reduction. So it was a bit different by some of the owners, but normally 3 days before the product expires, they lower the price of the product by 30% and then another day by 50%. And really with this price reductions, they can sell off the products because there are consumers who are really waiting for those products with a lower price because they cannot afford, yes, even in Germany, they cannot afford to buy the premium price product. So they have in some of the stores even special corners where the consumers know, I have to go there, I find a product with a lower price. And it's, I mean, in the expiration state, it's not expired yet, I can consume it safely. So this is a very good prevention strategy, this price reduction. Also, and now we are in the managerial part, one of our key findings is when the owners are responsible, the better they handle their store, the better they train their employees, the cleaner the store is, then the food is already not wasted anymore. So when an owner is really into its store, and of course he is because he makes money out of it, the food waste seems to be lower than in stores where they are employed manager. And this is a really interesting finding. So of course the money is an issue. I make money because I sell all my products in the store. So this was clearly stated by all of the owners. Regarding the food management, this is a very food waste management interesting thing. This was like, how is the procedure? And here the managers or the owners were really restricted to give information because we asked, how is it collected? Is it a private company? Is it a city collector? And not all of them wanted to display those information because the range was really different. Do I need to separate my garbage, or is it collected just in one big bin? And like I said, only really 2 were kind of honest. This is a big research gap to in future investigate what are the costs of really the food wasted. How are the different collectors handling the process, and where is it all really sent to? Because the owners have not a real clear information where the food waste is going to. And the last part, we asked how did the owners assess really their food waste management, and they were honest about it and said, well, overall, we want to save food because if we do not do it, it means a big financial loss for it. So intentionally already from our financial perspective, we want to lower, or we have to lower the food waste compared maybe to others. The biggest problem they stated is the consumer forecasting behavior, but they also said we could improve our ordering system because it's very hard for us. How is the weather going to look like regarding our fruits and vegetables? So if it's a hot season, we have a food waste regarding this because after one day, maybe the products are already, we cannot sell them anymore. So this might be a topic to look into. And also the food safety regulation, where I said I'm not an expert on it, but they said the expiration date is a problem. It says the food is expired today, but you can still safely consume it maybe a week after, but the legislation say we have to throw it away. So they say the system needs to be changed, and some of them even stated there will be a change, maybe with a label on it where the color changes, that the product cannot be safely consumed anymore. So in this topic, there's a lot of improvement for it. And for my conclusion, it is overall, like I already stated, the store owners try to avoid food waste because it means a financial loss for them. So they have a direct impact on it, also personally, a personal interest on it. And the main causes of food waste is expiration date, spoilage, consumer forecasting behavior, and sometimes overordering of the product if there are special sales going on. Well, thanks a lot for your attention. This was a very short, close wrap up due to 10 minutes time, but I think maybe there might be some questions.
We will take questions at the end of the session if time.
Okay, good, perfect.
And thank you so much, Tanya. And I have to say congratulations to you and your students for making businesses, especially retail, and for helping businesses and especially retail embrace science. So thanks, well done for cracking that code. Talking of codes, our next speaker is none else but Pascal Olhausen from Technische Universität Berlin. Pascal, we've just talked about behaviors in the shop. You're talking about behavior outside the home and how we can effectively change our behaviors. Nudging is something I heard about, but you seem to know a lot more about it. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Marcel. You see me, you hear me, you see my slides?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Marcel, and thank you for this opportunity. First to speak here, and a good morning from Berlin. The topic for the next 10 to 12 minutes will be the use of nudges in the out-of-home gastronomy with the goal to boost sustainable nutrition. We will have a look at the relevance of the sector, our study design, and our results, as well as our discussion, of course. And as we heard before, the global food system already has a large impact on global greenhouse gas emissions with a share of approximately 26%. And therefore, a reduction of the pollution is one of the biggest drivers to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, since at least 12 of the overall 17 SDGs are defined by indicators highly relevant to nutrition. Furthermore, the global food system cannot simply change to low carbon alternatives, e.g. the energy sector, and therefore a vast variety of methods is needed. Regarding the out-of-home catering sector, so we jump from the retailing sector now to the out-of-home catering sector. It is, after the retailing sector, the second biggest food distribution channel in Germany, with growth rates of about 4% per year until 2020, and therefore already a significant influence on, and therefore has an already significant influence on climate change. If we look at the main factors influencing sustainability in the sector, there are product quality, the supply chain, as well as in general consumer behavior. And regarding the supply side, especially cooking processes, recipes, and ingredients used are of relevance. And if we look for the demand side, mostly information-based strategies and behavior-based strategies are considered relevant. And current data shows that consumer behavior is perceived to have more potential impact to, on sustainability than changes on the producer side. Therefore, our project, Project Nagast, was funded by the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research in 2015. And we are now in the second project phase with the goal to transform the out-of-home gastronomy towards more sustainability. We see here our goal and the vision. Innovations in food offering, pricing, labeling, and presentation allow consumers to easily access reasonably priced, attractive, and enjoyable food that meets their health-oriented and sustainable lifestyle. Regarding our study design, we first need to have a quick look at nudge theory. Sustainable guest behavior in general can be promoted via system 1 nudges on the left side of the slide, as well as system 2 nudges. And on the one hand, system 1 nudges focus primarily on unconscious actions through changes in the physical environment. Here we tested the nudges counter position and menu position. And on the other hand, system 2 nudges, which focus primarily on conscious thought process. And here we will be testing the use of labels. For our study, we work together with 3 canteens, 1 of each segment, 1 business, 1 care, and 1 education. And our nudges were tested for 1 week each with 2 baseline measurements up front. But in these baseline measurements, of course, there were no nudges tested, only the harmonized menu plan we see soon. And to be able to compare the standardize our findings between our canteens, we used this harmonized menu plan during all the measurement weeks. And to avoid monotony for the guests, we implemented cooldown periods of 4 to 6 weeks between the measurements, between the baselines and between the interventions. And all of our nudges were only tested on the most sustainable dishes of the day, of course, to boost sustainable nutrition. If we look at the next slide, here you can see our project own calculation tool with the dimensions environment, fair for humans and animals, as well as health on an overall scale from 1 to 6. And with this tool, we calculated our recipes and the most sustainable dishes of the day. They can be seen here. And with this harmonized menu plan, we use the nudges on the dishes, which are with the green circle. And this harmonized menu plan was offered in all 3 participating canteens. If we now have a quick look at our nudges tested, then the first nudge change in the counter position. On the left side, we can see the baseline where our most sustainable dish was placed on the far left side, with the guests are approaching the counter from the right-hand side. And therefore, menu position 1 was the best counter position here, sales-wise, as well as based on information of the kitchen chefs. And for our nudge, we measured the differences in sale of the change in position from the curry from far left to far right. For the second nudge, we did literally the same, but this time with the menu positions. In the baseline, the most sustainable dishes were placed on the second menu position and were switched to the top in our intervention week. Regarding system 2 nudges, we used a label, and we used this label on A4 advertising stands to promote the most sustainable dishes. And we also used the label in NAGAST 1, the first project phase, but here we had an old version and condensed this old version to a newer version on only 1 page to be more eye-catching. Our survey period was from autumn 2019 to spring 2020, and we measured our harmonized dishes based on cash register data. And as you can see in the table, intervention weeks did not differ more than 4 weeks. And overall, we sold 15,235 dishes were sold in the canteens, and we included them in our analysis. So to take a quick look at our method, we used logistic regression analysis with predictive margins post-estimation, and as dependent variable, we used the choice of the most sustainable dish. As independent factor variables, we used, of course, the type of intervention, but also the day of the week, which corresponds to the specific most sustainable dishes, as well as the type of canteen, only in short here. And in contrast to NAGAST 1, where we only had 1 baseline, we calculated this second time in NAGAST 2 an average of our 2 baseline measurements to avoid deviations between the single measurement weeks, which was a problem in NAGAST 1, we think. And due to our real-world experimental approach, we had to deal with some problems and missing values. On 2 days in the baseline measurement in the care canteen and on Fridays in the business canteen. if we now look at our results of all three canteens combined, we are mostly interested in the top part of this table, and we can see the logistic regression coefficients as well as the post-estimation margins. And if we have a look first at the margins, we can see that during the baseline measurement, 19.4% of all harmonized dishes sold were the most sustainable dishes of the day, where we tested our nudges on in the next step. And this amount increased during our nudge intervention weeks. And for the nudge counter position, there was an increase to 20.9%, which did not lead to a significant difference to the baseline measurement if we look at the logistic regression coefficients. But for the menu position nudge, we see an increase up to 21.4%, which leads to significant differences to the baseline, and as well as for the System 2 nudge label, where we can see an increase up to 22.3%, which is resulting in a highly significant change to the baseline. Let us now have a look at the results of each single canteen segment and compare them to the baseline measurement. This is here the 0% line, as well as to the results of our first project phase. Here we can clearly see that despite this one outlier, it is the care canteen with the counter position, that all nudges in our second project phase were successful. Regarding our first project phase, only the nudge counter position tended to be successful, but again, we had to deal with only one baseline measurement in NAGAST 1 and also measured the label intervention with the old label design, and therefore the results differ. So what is our explanatory approach for the single negative outcome in the care canteen? It is the infrastructure inside this canteen. There only a short serving area is present and the counter area tend to overlap. We see here the short distribution area. And yeah, it can be seen on the photo. It's only approximately 1.5 meters wide. And we assume that oftentimes here the guests already choose their dishes on the menu inside this canteen, which can be confirmed also by the good nudging result of the intervention, of the menu intervention of the second intervention in this canteen. As a result of our study, we endorsed the out-of-home catering gastronomy to get in touch with the concept of nudging and to boost sustainable nutrition in their canteens, since the nudges counter position and especially menu position and the label worked in most of the cases in our second project phase. And as a take-home message, we also see that results can differ from canteen to canteen. We saw it in the care canteen here, and we therefore recommended to check the sales figures as well as the own infrastructure inside the canteens, the food offer, as well as processes, and especially the guest behavior to provide the most impact of the nudges, and of course to use them and to boost sustainable nutrition. Thank you. And we only have the numbers for our sources, so here are the sources. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pascal. You know, it's riveting to actually think that someone can change, can help us change our behaviors without us realizing, which is probably the core of marketing. But when it's covered in science, it makes even more impact. Also good to see that the multi dimensions around nudging, and to see that it is, as a process, both evolving and is being refined by work such as yours. So thank you very much for that. From nudging to sort of getting involved, our next speaker is none else but Dr. Petra Betig. Petra, I hope you're on.
Yes, good morning.
Petra he's taking us to movies apparently, so that's number one. But the other thing is that her underlying thinking is that we can learn better when we're having fun. Is that right?
Yes.
So please unleash the zombie attack.
Thank you very much, Marcel. Good morning, everybody. As I said, we're going to be talking about zombies, so I'm very happy to present our scientainment project to you. I hope you see screen and you hear me. Everything is okay?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. So you might be wondering why I'm going to be talking about zombies when we actually talk about food this morning. This is why I'll talk a bit about the target group and the goals that we had, the how and why, and the evaluation that we would like to do. So I'm a lecturer at Sustainability Communication, and when we start a new project, we usually work with the IOOI model. We usually start by thinking about the impact that we would like to achieve. And just to show you an easy example, and probably in context with Kanji's research this morning, imagine we would like to reduce the meat consumption in Switzerland, which is still very high at about 1 kilogram of meat per person per week. And of course, just by having a simple communication intervention, you can't really reduce meat consumption to zero, but we would like to contribute to reduced meat consumption. So we put in a lot of ideas, we look for finances, we develop a concept, and we might come up with this exhibition that we had on meat and environmental consequences. And the people that actually come and visit us in this exhibition, as a direct effect of this visit, they the next time they go to a restaurant might decide, or we hope they will decide, to choose not a meat option but a vegetarian meal. So just because they came to this exhibition, they then make a more sustainable choice. This exhibition was produced in the gardens of our campus at Grüntal. So our whole university is surrounded by beautiful gardens, and they actually work as a showcase for the research that we do. So the image you see here, that's the Gräserland. It's a grassland. It's a garden on sustainable nutrition. And we realized that we actually have lots of visitors. They come into the gardens because they walk their dogs, or because they just enjoy the beautiful gardens, or because they want to learn more about the information that we provide on sustainable nutrition, on soil ecology, on renewable energies, and so on. But we also realized that there were some people that we never see in our garden, and that's people like, for example, Marisa. So Marisa could be a 21-year-old Swiss female. She's just starting studies in the fall, but her hobbies are mostly shopping and makeup tutorials, so she has no interest in sustainability. She might sometimes try a vegan product, but just because it produces glowing skin, or so they say. So we would never see Marisa in our garden. We would also never meet Florin in our garden. He's a bit younger. He's mostly interested in soccer and video games, and he also has really no interest in sustainability. So in this case, we decided that we would like to reach these young people and have an increased interest in sustainability in young people and adults. And again, we invested ideas, work, and money. And we thought about what we would like to achieve if Florin or Marisa would actually come to our gardens. And we realized that they wouldn't come here to be lectured on not eating meat, but they could come to the garden to have fun. And the effect should also be that they have these positive emotions and they learn some few things. So then we came up with our product with the zombie attack. So this is the result that we produce. This is what it looks like from the outside. So we're trying to target these young adults or teenagers and invite them to come to our gardens to save the world from the zombies. So the first thing they do, they download an app to their cell phone, and then in teams of 2 to 3 people or 4 people, they try to solve these puzzles that we have for them, and they just walk through the gardens. So the setting for this attack, zombie attack, are actually our gardens. The story is bloody. It's completely fictional. It's completely bogus. It's all about zombies. It's really targeted at young adults. But the information that they need to solve these puzzles to get to the next post are scientific. So they need to look at the scientific information we have in the garden to be able to solve the puzzles. So this combination of science together with the entertainment, with the fun part, and we call that scientainment. And this is just to give you an idea, that's the trailer that we produced, what this zombie mission might look like. Come to Adamsville and save the world from the zombies. So you can see it's targeted at young people. It's a zombie story, but there's some science too. So how did we develop this? We first asked our partner institute to help us with the app. They did all the programming. Then we developed a story outline, and yes, that's really inspired by The Walking Dead or World War Z. So all these zombie movies on Netflix right now. Then we decided on what kind of learning objectives these kids should have, and we put all these learning objectives into the puzzles, and then we had to do some fine-tuning so the puzzles and the story would work together. And then we did lots and lots of tests with people from the target group to make sure that the puzzles were difficult enough, but not too difficult, that they were having fun, and that they actually learned something. And this is just to give you an idea of the zombie, so I'll just let you read that. That's the beginning. So the zombie invasion threatens the world. So you can see the story is really, it's a zombie story. It has holes. It doesn't really work, but all zombie stories work like that. And it was really fun to develop a story like that. And then we have the puzzles, and this is where the science comes in. Oh, sorry, there's more blood. And so this is Annette, the scientist, talking. Last week, she cooked a meal for her friends with polenta, which is a corn grits, and roast beef. And she used 2 kilograms of corn and 3 kilograms of roast beef. And she's wondering if she'll ever be able to do that again because the farmers are scared to go out. And then she's wondering, so how much land was needed to produce all these ingredients for the meal? And of course, you wouldn't know that, but the students can then go, or the visitors can then go to our gardens. And here in this garden on sustainable food, we have the 27 square meters that are necessary for producing 1 kilogram of beef. And we have the 2 square meters that are necessary for producing a kilogram of corn. And that's how they can calculate. And they will have this image of how much land is necessary to produce meat in their head, just associated with the zombie mission. Still, why did we choose a scientainment approach? We really think that people don't want to be lectured about not that they shouldn't eat meat, but everybody wants to have fun. So the people come here to have fun. They have an interactive group experience. So they will remember it as something emotionally positive, as something fun, and they will associate these learnings that they've had with the fun that they've had. And we think that will result in a very sustainable learning experience, which is why we started working with scientainment. So we have some first results, but due to the pandemic, our gardens were closed this summer, which is why we weren't really able to do all the research that we want to do. But what we can see until now is that most groups actually manage to save the world. It takes them around 54 minutes that they spend running around in the garden to find all the hints that we have. And actually the best team really made full points. We also asked them what they learned, and about 80% said that they actually learned that eating vegetarian products has less impact on the environment compared to meat consumption. 20% just say that they learned zombies like meat, which was not really the point, but anyway. And they actually seem to have fun because they rated the app with 4 stars. So that's also what we wanted to achieve. And here's just some of the feedback that we had. So they have to read the texts carefully, yes, because that's where the science is. And it really read like a diary, and it felt like someone was talking to us. So that's really what we wanted to achieve, so that they're really inside of this story. I thought they're interesting riddles and good to make a cool. So yes, it was young people talking. We didn't have, it sounds very positive here, and actually we didn't have a lot of bad feedback. We had one family who said it was too difficult, so yeah, that could happen. And we had some technical difficulties at first with some of the puzzles because there was a GPS needed, and with Android cell phones we just had difficulties with GPS, so it was really technical difficulties that we were fighting with. What we actually wanted to do this summer was an in-depth evaluation to find out whether the assignment approach works, whether they did have fun, but whether they also learned something, and not just that zombies don't like meat or they like meat. And we wanted to find out whether a prior interest in sustainability in sciences or in video games actually influenced the learning outcomes. So for that, we made questionnaires and guided interviews, so a mixed method, and we had lots of school classes who were going to come to do the zombie mission together with a control group in the same school. And then it was really 1 week before the pandemic, everything was shut down, and so we couldn't do that, so the whole evaluation is postponed. The other thing that we're planning to do is actually produce some more educational material so that the school classes can come and do the zombie mission, and then the teacher takes them back to the classroom, and they actually can talk a bit more about sustainable nutrition. The whole project was done in-house, so it was different research groups that we had, but we had a collaboration with Urban Escape, which is a company who actually has lots of escape rooms and escape missions, just to make sure that the fun doesn't get too low, so that it was really an experience that people will pay for. And the whole finance was from the Lotteriefonds of the Canton Zurich. So I hope you can see that we really had fun. And of course, if you're in the area and you would like to try and save the world, you're very welcome. Please contact me and I'll send you a code so you can try it yourself.
Wow, thank you so much, Petra. This is really eye-opening and a wonderful and novel way of looking at learning and at least converting us to a much more sustainable way of looking at our food and our environment. That was Petra, Dr. Petra Bejtek from Zurich University of Applied Sciences. Now, funny enough, I've always been told not to play with my food, but it seems like it's the way forward and the way to sort of basically you know, get on with it and have a positive impact. Our next speaker is Belinda Lee. Belinda, welcome. Belinda is from Simon Fraser University in Canada. So thanks for making it on the call so late for you, or so early, depending on what side of midnight we are now. So playing with food is fun. That's what you're telling us. And gamification is a change vector. Is that so, Belinda? The floor is yours.
Great, thank you. It is still on the before midnight, so it's still the 16th over here. So good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you for coming to this presentation. I just wanted to check you can see my slide there.
Yes.
Yep,
We can
perfect.
hear you well.
All right, so before I start, I just like to acknowledge that I am making this presentation on unceded Coast Salish territory of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam nations. Through our research, we hope to improve the sustainability of our food systems, our relationship with food, and in that way contribute to reconciliation with our Indigenous relations. Now this project here, it actually ties in very well with the past few presentations. We looked at awareness campaigns for food waste. Now you're wondering, like, why is this important? Well, more than 63%, oh, where are my slides going? There we go. Yes, 63% of household food waste in Canada could have been eaten, and that's similar in other parts of at least the nations with more developed economies. And this is a photo from a waste audit that I did at an apartment building. And I sorted through all of this myself. A lot of it could have been eaten. So it's really important for us to find a way for consumers to reduce sort of food waste, because it's coming from the homes. And a lot of food waste comes from homes, about half, compared to things from production or from retail. Now, in the past few years, starting with WRAP, with the Love Food Hate Waste campaign, so that's in the UK in the mid-2000s, household food waste awareness campaigns have spread all over the world, including to Canada. And these campaigns usually target certain practices like shopping for food, planning for meals, using your leftovers, understanding best before dates, and making changes to your behavior. But our question is, do they actually work? Because we have a lot of governments and a lot of organizations sinking millions of dollars into these types of campaigns. So our goal of our study is to understand how people engage with these campaigns and if there are any shifts in household practices. So we made a fairly simple campaign because we had a very limited budget, so we had to do the most that we could with it. And we had a campaign targeted for households in Toronto. So I'm based over on the coast of British Columbia, but we actually did this research in the heart of Canada, where we have a very diverse audience. We have a lot of people from different cultures and different types of housing environments and etc. So the campaign pretty much has an information booklet about food waste, why it's important, some tips to reduce food waste at home, and a fridge magnet with some storage guidelines on how to organize your food. And we tested different engagement strategies. So 2 of them are more traditional, so just getting information itself. Another one where people were invited to community workshops where they would get free giveaways and get tips on how to reduce food waste and have like cooking demonstrations. So it's quite interactive. And then the third one, that's the part that's the fun, super fun part in my opinion, is the online game, which hasn't really been tested before in terms of food waste. And we didn't, again, have very much budget, so it wasn't nearly as fancy as the zombie attack game. It was just a trivia game where people answered a few trivia questions, and it didn't matter what they answered, they just had to participate in the game to earn a gift card if they do enough levels, and they got a new level every week. We also had a control group which had no campaign at all and just it participated in the surveys for tracking. So in terms of our research participants, we recruited quite a number of participants for each group so that we had a large enough sample size. And then they had different types of engagement over a 12-week period. So the control group had nothing. Information group did get 4 newsletters, either by mail or email. The ones with the workshops got the newsletters on top of invitations to go to the workshops. And then the information group had the newsletters on top of an online game level that gets unlocked each week. Now, you can see the pre-survey, we had a good number of participants, but post-survey, the number of participants did drop because this was a voluntary study. We offered people gift cards to do the second survey, but there's only so much you can do to get people to answer questions. So unfortunately, we had quite a bit of attrition. However, we did also do a focus group about 3 months after the end of the campaign with the campaign participants, just to get a little bit more information on what they thought about it and to tease out some things that we weren't able to get out of the surveys. So now that we did all this work, you're probably wondering, okay, well, did any of this actually turn into anything? Well, not super surprised, but the practices generally stayed the same. So the way that we measured this is in the pre-survey and the post-survey, we had a number of Likert scale questions from 1 to 5, from never to always, of different practices that people would engage in. So for meal planning, we asked about people making shopping lists, if they do unplanned purchases, if they check things like quantities before going to the grocery store, and so on. In terms of management of leftovers, the questions are, do you use your leftovers? Do you give them away? Do you incorporate them into a different meal? Do you throw them out? In terms of the best before dates, the questions were related to, do you eat things past the best before dates, which might also be known as expiry dates in some other places? Or do you use your senses and check them before you eat them, or do you just throw them away? So unfortunately, for meal planning and the management of leftovers, there wasn't much that changed. The two that were significantly different, we're thinking those are probably coincidences, especially because one of them's the control group. But for the interesting part is the best before dates, which seemed to be quite significant for the online game group only. So that kind of drew up some questions of like, okay, well, what's going on here? And there wasn't much literature out there, so we had to make some guesses. Fortunately, we do have a few hypotheses. So the first one related to why best before dates, but not meal planning or leftover management, was answered a little bit from our focus groups. What we think is that people just have a lot going on. So when they're in the retail environment, there's a lot of specials and you might be tempted to buy more. So as you can see in one of our participants, there's like, well, you know, I just wanted to buy some extra pineapples because they were $1 and they bought them, but do they actually eat all of them? Who knows? Same thing with using leftovers, you know, like you might have an intention, you're like, okay, I'm gonna cook this extra rice and then tomorrow I'm gonna eat it, I'm gonna eat the next day. And then suddenly you go out for food, or you're just like, this is disgusting, I don't wanna eat it anymore. Or you put it in the back of the fridge and you forget about it and it becomes a science experiment, maybe for a zombie attack, who knows? So there's a lot of these competing goals, and our guess is that for things like a retail environment or taste preferences, that type of stuff, it's a lot harder to control. So it's a lot more difficult to change behavior. However, for something like best before dates, the change is more so in knowledge, right? Of, oh, a best before date, it's just a guideline, no big deal. We can actually eat it past the best before date. I just have to give it a bit of a sniff. Doesn't smell bad, I can eat it, and so on. So that's what our initial hypothesis is that for things where there's fewer competing goals, then maybe they are easier interventions or easier messages that can be spread. And that might be useful for Petra, who was saying that consumers weren't willing to buy food past the best before date in a retail environment. So maybe with this intervention, they'll be more willing to do that. Now, the second part is, okay, well, what's with the gamification thing? Why were they so different than everyone else? And we'd like to use the motivation, opportunity, ability framework to explain this. So this framework pretty much says if you want behavioral change, you need elements of motivation, ability, and opportunity together. So a traditional campaign is pretty good at some of these pieces. Motivation, that means people wanting to reduce food waste, not necessarily from an environmental perspective, maybe, but perhaps from a health perspective, for saving money, they have some driver to want to reduce food waste. So when you have a campaign that shows like, oh my gosh, there's so much greenhouse gases, or you're losing all this money from wasting food, then maybe people would be motivated. So that element's there. Ability is pretty much knowledge and skills to be able to do the thing that you want people to do. So in this case is use up your leftovers, don't buy too much, etc. And that's very well covered in a lot of campaigns. So for instance, here is like some recipe you can try to make a delicious curry from whatever you have left in your fridge. Now, opportunity, that's more structural. That's things that are systemic or are present that influences your behaviors, but without being something like a motivation or ability. So for example, a law, or a way that the store is organized, or quantities of food and how they're packaged. It's all things that you can't really do much with the campaign, and it's a missing piece. So one thing that the game offered is a bit of a nudge. So Pascal was mentioning nudges in terms of having placards up or having the menu information or changing things around. Another type of a nudge is a reminder, or just something that's always there to tell you, hey, have you thought about food waste? So in this case, every single week, people had a reminder to go and play the game. And then maybe that was enough for them to have it on the top of mind and get them to do something. So that's our initial thought, but I had to dig a little bit deeper to see like, okay, well, Did people actually play the game? Like, what's going on? So this is after some bad news of practice is not changing that much besides best before dates for one group. The gamification results were quite positive. A lot of people, like more than 3/4 of people, played more than 3/4 of the levels of the game. Now, part of that could just be from the gift card, because if you play every single level, you get $20, but really $20 is not that much over a 12-week period. And if you convert it to euros, you know, that's like 14 euros. So, I mean, from a return on investment perspective, like that might be quite good that you can shift behavior with a fairly small investment. And the other part of it was, we were thinking, oh, maybe it's just young people or people who like are really techie or have like high levels of education that would play an online game. Fortunately, against most of the common demographic variables, it didn't really change. It wasn't just young people, old people like to play it, male, female, income, household size, didn't really appear to affect it. The only thing that was a little bit different was that households had children didn't engage with the game as much as households without children. And for that, it makes sense. A lot of parents are very busy. Do they have time to play a silly little trivia game once a week? Maybe not, but that's okay, because at least with a lot of the other demographic variables, it wasn't that much of a difference. So with that, in this very initial study, we think that gamification does have a role in encouraging behavior change to reduce household food waste. And in this quote, you can see here, it's a really good example of how something that's so simple could just get people to think about something a little bit more and maybe try something different, or maybe just, you know, look at that yogurt that has the expiry date there and eat it anyway. So through these types of gamification or nudging interventions, we think that there is a possibility to get people to reduce food waste and deal with that 35% of food that is wasted in the world. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Belinda. Look, one of my takeaways here is that gamification takes away a lot of fear and probably also a dogma around how we consume food. So thank you for that insight. I mean, it is absolutely fantastic. Now, we've talked about how we need to change our diet. We've talked about nudging. We've talked about the businesses embracing science to do better on food waste with Tonya, and we've talked about zombies. I don't think you could have ever put any of these things together around food choices and waste management in the food environment. Our last speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is Sonia Trachsel. Okay, I hope I didn't kill that. So Dr. Sonia Trachsel from the Zurich School of Life Science and Facility Management. Sonia, you've heard of all of these things, but your take is that it's not just about sustainable diet. It's not just about wasteless diet. It's about sufficient diet as a way forward. Tell us what it's all about.
Yes, hello, thank you. Okay, hello everyone. I welcome you to my presentation about the motives for sufficiency in individual dietary decisions. Yes, like we already heard today, our global food system requires many resources and causes enormous damages to our environment. So if we do not want to overexploit our resources, we have to change the whole food system. And not only new technologies and new forms of organizations are needed, but also behavioral changes on the social and individual level. That means we will also have to change our eating habits. For example, as we heard today, we have to reduce meat consumption and food waste, as well as we have to avoid foods that cause more damages to the environment than others. This means that we have to foster sufficiency in nutrition. Until now, sufficiency is more connected to housing and energy. Then, but what is sufficiency in general? That sufficiency means renunciation or reduction of consumption, and sufficiency is one of the sustainability strategies. And sufficiency in nutrition, what is that? And in our work, we mean by sufficiency in nutrition food choices that uses or damages fewer natural resources in comparison to other foods. And in terms of sustainability, a sufficient diet would have many benefits, but often sufficient behavior is associated with little enjoyment and thus have a bad image. And in order to find out how more people could be motivated to adopt sufficiency in their diets, we wanted to look at people who declare themselves as sufficient eaters and what motivates them not to eat some foods or to reduce food consumption. Hence, we addressed two research questions in our study. The first one is, for what reasons do people adopt sufficiency in their diets? And the second, how can people be typified based on their motives to follow such a sufficiency diet? In order to answer these questions, we interviewed 10 individuals in the region of Zurich in Switzerland. And to be eligible for an interview, the interviewees should declare themselves as to follow a sufficiency diet, and that their diets should fit with our definition of sufficiency in nutrition. And for the analysis of the interviews, we took factors from literature influencing sufficiency in diets, and these factors were goals, values, behavior, perceived effects of behavior, and the environment. And also from literature, we looked how these factors are interlinked and how they influence an individual to adopt a more sufficient eating behavior. And values lay the basis for the adoption of a sufficient diet, but also the environment is a crucial factor influencing diet behavior. Yes. And based on our analysis, we identified 4 types of people that follow sufficiency in their diets. The first type was the sustainable. For type 1, values like equity between generations, between rich and young, and animals and humans are central. And hence their goals are to preserve the environment and the resources for the next generation, and to ensure fair access to all humans to nutrition. And another goal on the individual level is to have a better conscience. And in green, you can see direct citations from the interviews. And type 2 was the healthy. Although health is its primary objective in their nutrition of the second type, their eating habits are often more sustainable than the average because they eat less animal products and avoid convenience food and coffee and alcohol. The third type was the athletic. Although, like type 2, its primary goal is not to save the planet or to have a more sustainable eating behavior, its eating behaviors also add to more sufficiency in nutrition. For example, they eat less animal products and avoid convenience food. And the fourth type is the conscience. For him, for this type, nutrition is highly valued as itself, as a way to achieve a healthier and more sustainable lifestyle. They like to deal with nutrition, cook themselves, like to preserve foods themselves and know new trends in nutrition, and generally follow a healthy and sustainable lifestyle, and they prefer healthy, seasonal, regional and plant-based products. And this also fits with our definition of sufficiency in nutrition. And common for all the four types was that sufficiency does not mean giving up something for them. They see it as a benefit for their well-being, and often the environment was crucial to a crucial motive to adopt sufficiency in nutrition. Families, friends, networks, and education and diseases played an important role for the interviewees to adopt sufficiency diets. That means our study showed that not only people for whom environmental protection is very important adopt sufficiency diets, there are also other value orientations which lead to sufficiency in nutrition, for example, like sportiness or health. And hence, in order to foster sufficiency in nutrition, these different value orientations could be addressed in programs for healthy and resource-saving nutrition. This typology may help to tailor programs for these different types. Like nudging strategies could make use of these different value orientations. For example, in restaurants, dishes could be tailored for these different types. And measures for sufficiency in nutrition should also consider that the social environment is very important to foster sufficiency in nutrition. So food networks and solidarity-based agriculture and so on are important and should be supported. And for all the interviewees, like I said, their sufficient diet was not didn't mean renunciation. So the positive sides of sufficiency nutrition should be communicated, and positive experience could be shared in order to enhance sufficiency in nutrition and contribute to a more sustainable food system. And like our study was laid the foundation for further investigation. The factors that influence sufficiency in nutrition could be further elaborated and linked to existing theories about human and social behavior and change. And also interesting is the interplay between social, economic, cultural, political environment and individual choices. And I think if such studies would be conducted in other cultures, other social circumstances. Maybe sufficiency in nutrition can have like totally different meanings for other people. Yeah, so thank you very much for your attention. And here you see again the gardens, which was Petra Betting talking about, our campus Grüntal.
Yeah, that helps us, you know, keep our jealousy in check. You have a wonderful garden there. So,
thank you.
So well done, and thank you so much for bringing this up. Sufficiency diet. I don't think I had come across that before, and I'm sure many of us hadn't. What is the right name for that? Sufficitarian? I don't know.
We we said sufficiency diets or sufficiency nutrition because we also didn't find a term which was already established in literature.
Well, it's fantastic, and thank you all for making this this call. It's been quite a wonderful and entertaining and very sort of advanced way of looking at food choices and food waste management. We started with Kanji, who
Marcel, I'm very sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
There were some very interesting questions not in the chat, and I just want to pick out one, if I may.
Sure.
And I think that question will also resonate with you.
Mm-hmm.
If I could just repeat a question that came up a few times is, a number of presented from the first to the last make certain assumptions that about nutrition, about diet, about food choices that seem to some of the participants extremely difficult to actually follow or replicate in, let us call it the global south, or let us call it in lower income countries. Could maybe one or two people reflect on how a certain ideal world? We saw the garden in the last presentation, and we heard, for instance, the presentation from the ETH at the first. Could somebody maybe reflect on how they may need to qualify an idea or two that they presented if we take, let us say, 80% of the global population into consideration?
Linda here. I'll jump in a little bit. And yes, I do think that's very important. And in some ways, I feel that is a missing piece in terms of food waste, because the causes of food waste are so different in different contexts. And we saw that a bit even in our study, because we had such a diverse mix of socioeconomic groups. So I'll offer a little bit, but I do feel that in some ways, I wish that on this panel, we do have more people from the global south who can offer their perspectives and their insights. But one thing that what we did notice was, in terms of food waste, a lot of times it's associated with the more money you have, the more you waste. And we didn't see that as the case. There's actually quite a bit of food that's wasted from, say, improper storage, or from like different types of like food management and literacy skills that would be very beneficial for all people. And I think could be beneficial for those from lower income groups to be able to stretch food dollars further. For example, in like different tricks to, you know, buy the food that's discounted and put it into like a freezer, or in some cases drying and canning, and those types of skills that would allow you to preserve and use food more and more, so that you're able to save your money on being able to get the most out of your food. So I think that's one part. And then another part that we found is just acceptability of like retail standards, because so much food is wasted because we think it needs to be perfect. And I believe that there's a lot that can be done in changing those perspectives, not just amongst the global north, but also in the global south, where a lot of the food is produced and then wasted because it can't go to market. So that's just a few things of linkages between, you know, all of our economies. And yeah, I think next time we have one of these sessions, we should try to balance the presenters, especially from say places with remote and indigenous communities, from the global south, and to have more diversity.
Perhaps I can add a word here. We saw in the sort of, for instance, the African supply chain or agri supply chain part. We've seen that a lot of the blockages are actually on the route to market. So that's probably where most of the production is wasted. And in a way, it's probably easier in the global north, so to speak, to measure food waste at retail point than it would be in places that are perhaps less formal in the distribution sense. But I think what is great in this session is that we are actually seeing a lot of hope, both in the way we should think about our diet and what we eat or how we eat. I think those are universal. Those are universal concerns, but also on how we communicate around food in a formal environment, and perhaps food for thought. No puns intended. Food for thought in how we communicate about food or what food we consume in a less formal environment. So in that sense, I think it is true that there is much more work to be done in the global south, or at least would love to see more work or how it works in the global south. But there are also very positive things to take away here, and certainly hope and health are two of them from my perspective. So with that, let me thank everybody on the call and every participant and every panelist. It's been an exciting morning. It's been an exciting session, and lots of food for thought, I have to say. Thank you very much, and I'll hand over to to Max.
I have nothing else to add other than to thank you. I just sent actually a message to the panelists and to Marcel, but also to those. This was a wonderful session. I think there's always more to consider, and there's so many other aspects. We could have had a whole conference on just this session. Thank you so much, Marcel. Thank you for the presenters. I wish we had more time for discussion. In the meantime, we are now going on a